So I have to get my other tripod because this tripod sucks. If I put it up high, okay, well, it like just goes down. But let me see. There we go. I wanted to talk about the reason why I don't don't call myself a Christian anymore. I'm not a Christian anymore. I'm not a religious person at all, and I'm not very a spiritual person. Um, I want to go. I want to talk a little bit about my childhood. So, my mom raised me pretty much as a single parent. My parents got divorced when I was like maybe not. I don't think I was even born yet, but they started the divorce before I was born, but it wasn't actually finalized until I was almost 8 years old. So they were going through a divorce for a long time, and it wasn't a nice divorce. It was constantly child support battles, bad negativity, like they didn't like each other. And what's crazy is like my mom, I think, was like 19 or 20 when she got married to my dad. My dad was probably like 25, because I don't even know how old my dad is. I believe he's 50, like 52, and my mom is 48. So 49, 50, 51, 52. So she was 19, then he was like 23. I don't know. I feel like he was a lot older than her, but maybe I got it wrong. But I just know he was older than her. And, one of the reasons why my mom really wanted to get married was to get out of the house that she was living in. So she saw my dad as an opportunity to get out of the situation that she was in, because she lived with her mom, and she didn't want to be under her mom's authority anymore. So my mom I never really heard her talking about Jesus or anything about the Bible. I think like there was one point where she had us like recite the books of the Old Testament. But it was like she wanted us to know about it, but she didn't really like teach it or like actually help us to understand what these things meant. But growing up, from, I want to say, from a baby, from like 4 years old up until 8 years old, I lived with my grandmother, who was very religious, very a church woman. We went to church with her every Sunday, and then like Wednesday there was like another study. We were so involved in the church, and she would do things like host like movie night at the church, where like the church community could come eat hot dogs and potato chips and watch a movie. During the summer, she did like a snow cone setup, and she did a lot of things for the church. My grandmother was very affectionate. My grandmother was probably, looking back, the only person in my life who showed me tender affection, like gentle affection. Like I remember, whenever I would come in the house after school, or whenever she'd see me, she'd be like, "Come here, baby." And I just lay on her chest, and she'd wrap her arms around me and rock back and forth. It almost brings me to tears, because it's like that hasn't happened in a long, 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 long time. I don't remember hugging anybody like that in a long, 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 long time. And it's so crazy that like I didn't see it like that as a kid, like I just saw it as like, this feels good. And I didn't think about one day that it would go away. But yeah, like I said, gentle affection. She was very Christian. She teaches us all the Christian songs. When the saints, no, it's like, Jesus loves me, yes, I know. And like, we would learn all the church songs. Like, we were heavily in the church. That was a big part of our lives. But I didn't really understand it. Like, it wasn't like I went to church to actually learn. It was just more so church was fun. And we did like a lot of like the kids groups and stuff like that. I remember we had this something called Super Soaker Sunday. And that was during the summertime, where they would clear out the church parking lot, and they would just put like fun houses and water slides. And at the end of the day, like we were doing that from like 12 to like the evening. And when it was finally done, we would all go inside, and then we would like pick tickets out of like a hat or something. And if they called your ticket, you got to come up and get a reward. So I don't know if it was set up so that everybody ended up getting a prize or reward, but I ended up getting called, and I got this like baton and it had like two little globes on the ends, on each end, with like a snow globe, like with water and stuff. And like looking back at my childhood, my grandmother, I was in that environment, and yeah, that's really all I can say. Like, I was in the environment, the gospel songs, the church, but it didn't really, it meant something to me, but at the same time, I was a kid. Like, it was just fun, entertainment, something to do, something I had to sit through. I wasn't really listening and trying to learn. And then there was a period of time where I think I was 9 years old, and after we moved out of my grandmother's, when I was like 8, when I was like 9, no, when I was like 8, we didn't talk much about the Bible. It wasn't really brought up, it wasn't really anything that was on the forefront of our daily lives. But, if somebody would have asked us, or somebody would ask our mom, we would have said we were Christians. So when we moved again, when my mom reconnected with an old childhood sweetheart that she had, and they dated for a little. The story was, this man named Mike, him and my mom used to be real good friends. And then my mom met my father, and so they had to cut it off. And so when, now that my mom's not in a relationship with my father no more, they decided to reconnect. And so we ended up moving in with him. And he lived, I think I described this before, he lived on disability, lived in subsidized housing. Like, he did not pay rent. He paid like $100 in rent. I think he paid for the BG&E, but he didn't have a job. He lived off of food stamps, 100% government assistance, because he had a disability. He had cerebral palsy. And it's crazy though, because his disability didn't stop him from working, because he did end up getting a job. So I guess it was just easier for him to live off the government and play video games all day long. Now, he had a daughter, and but he didn't really take care of his daughter. From what I understand, he actually neglected her in very terrible situations. Some situations where he made her literally sit in her own shitty diaper for hours as like a punishment, and would just leave her in the house. So he was not a very good father. But, despite all that, my mom was like, yeah, let's move in with him, because she needed a place to live. We couldn't afford to live in the place that we were living in. So my mom, has a pattern of getting with men because it benefits, her and her children, and her not being able to provide for us. That was what she had to do. And she also loved him. They used to be childhood friends. So probably for her, it was like killing two birds with one stone. So, around this time, my stepfather, whenever my mom was gone, like, he talked to us about the Illuminati, and what was it? It was something else, the Illuminati, martial law, and it scared me. Like, it honestly terrified me. He talked about 666 and the devil and the go and all this other stuff, and it scared me. Like, it made me look at the world as, like, this really exists? Like, this is really a thing that could potentially affect me? And then he told us about the Pledge of Allegiance and how we shouldn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And that's crazy, because I don't remember why, but I remember I was in school the next day, and it was time to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I didn't stand up. And my teacher was like, why aren't you standing? Because I'd stood every single day before that. She was like, why aren't you standing? And I was like, because my parents told us we didn't have to. And because I wanted to be different, because I wanted the attention, I was like, no, I'm going to just sit here. But, yeah, so that was that. And then I want to say when I was 15, that was 15 or 16, that was when Christianity and the whole realm started to come back into my life. because there was a period of time when I was 15 or 16 where my mom was just a very rude person. Like, we would play, so we played board games. Like, a thing of my family was board games, board games, board games. That's how we connected. That's how we had fun. But it also turned into like chaos, because when you have parents who aren't really playing the game to bond, but they're playing the game to like boost their egos, it wasn't fun, you know? It kind of turned into like this thing of like, I don't know. It just wasn't always a fun experience. But we were playing this game called Monopoly Cheat. It's like this version of Monopoly where like the whole point of the game is to get away with cheating and not getting caught. And so what happens is you have to do your cheat. So like the card that everybody always wanted to get, well, the card that you would just pick a card, and you had to try to do the cheat, and then you finally call out, "Cheater, I cheated," when the next person rolls. So if nobody catches you cheating before the next person rolls, then you got away with it. So one of the cards was like bank heist, and it was like steal money from the bank. And so what my mom did was she literally would steal the whole stack of 500s. So, you know, now that I'm an adult, I'm like, what is the point in playing at that point? Because if your mindset is, I'm going to get over on everybody and steal all the money out of the bank, like, yeah, you're playing the game, but is that really fun? It's kind of the same dilemma where you're playing with kids as an adult, and you're like, should I let them win, you know? Because, you know, you want to build their confidence, you want to make them feel good, and you obviously know that they don't have the same skills as you do, so they're probably not going to win. But I don't think it is a good thing to just constantly win, and beat them, because I believe that these are moments where you could build them up and even teach them, you know, different ways on how to win. It's a good opportunity. And so it was kind of like that same dilemma. And, you know, she would just take everything. And so she would do that. And so, like, we would play. And then one day we would play. And this one day, my sister, she got irritated. No, this is what my mom would do. I got it. So whenever she would steal the money, and then she would do something like, we would have to sell one of our houses, and instead of just picking up the house and putting it back in the box, she would flick it and go pew. And that really pissed you off, because it's like, why are you plucking the house off of my property? Like, that is just so rude. And so, you know, I think what happened was like my sister got tired of it and she did it back. And then my mom did it back. And then my sister, I think she ripped up the cards and threw them. And then my mom did something back, to the point, like, I don't remember exactly how it went, but to the point where everything is on the floor. All this chaos erupted just from a game, but the game was all over the floor, houses all over the floor, and my mom got me pinned up against the wall, yelling in my face over a game. You know, so much chaos happened just from a game. And, you know, so, you know, my mom was not a very nice person. Like, she was always walking around complaining that we weren't doing enough. My whole entire life, I've never heard "good job, Raymond," like, ever. Unless I was in school, but nobody in my house or my environment was like, "Oh, you did a good job. Like, you know, good job. Keep up the work." Like, those aren't things that I heard. I never really heard encouraging things. Like, if there was dishes in the sink, "Why is there always dishes in the sink? Y'all don't do nothing, da 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 da." And what pissed me off even more was, like, my mom tried to pretend like we were slobs, but my mom did not clean up after herself either. She would drop dishes in the sink and walk away, and when the dishes would pile up, nobody in the house but us children did the chores. And it's like, cool, yeah, like, we are not working, we just go to school, you know, but my stepfather's bum ass is in the room. He could wash some dishes or put them in the dishwasher. Like, there isn't any reason why the whole house can't do their part, even if you are working, because if there was not children here to do it, you would still have to work and do it yourself. So it's like, I feel like it would set a good example to step in and, take that initiative and do the dishes one day. But it was not like that. They would cook, and they would cook dinner for us, and then we clean the dishes. And so, my mom, she just found I gotta get something to drink. Okay, yeah. So, it seemed like my parents, anything that had to do with humiliation, they loved it. Like, any opportunity to humiliate us, they took it. And, like I was saying, my mom was just a negative person. I did not like my mother. I hated my mother because it felt like she didn't see me. And all I wanted was for her to see me, because if she could see me, she wouldn't treat me how she was treating me. She wouldn't be yelling at me. She wouldn't seem to not like me, because it didn't feel like my mother loved me. Even though she said it, I didn't feel loved by her. I felt like I was an inconvenience for her. I felt like I was a burden for her. I felt like I made her life more difficult. So I did not love my mother, and I didn't respect her either, because I could see that the reason why we were living the type of way we were was because of the decisions that she made. And I just didn't like my mother. I didn't. And so, this one day, recently, my grandmother had started inviting us to Bible studies. And so because we didn't live together at this point, we would get on Zoom and we would pick a book of the Bible to read, and we would read it, and she'd ask us questions and even give us homework. And my grandmother has always found joy, and my grandmother has always found a place in teaching. She loves teaching. She likes leading people to information. So that's what we would do. And during this time, we would pray together. We would recite the Lord's Prayer. And we kind of bonded in that. What it felt like was my mom wanted to change herself, and she saw this as a way to change herself by reconnecting with something that has been in the background of her life. And I guess she felt like if I come back to that, my life will start getting better, because this is what has worked, for everybody in my environment, because our whole family is kind of Christian or whatever. So, around this time, maybe a couple weeks later, and we're still doing these Bible studies, my grandmother is like, do you guys want to get baptized? Because I started to understand, I think it's in the book of the 3 first books of the Old Testament, I think. No, it was John the Baptist explains the baptism of Jesus. And that was something necessary to be accepted into the kingdom of heaven. It was something that needed to be done. And because, I was learning about it and I didn't want to go to hell, I was like, well, yeah, let me do it. So we ended up going to the church. My mom drove us out there, and my grandmother baptized us. And I remember the water, it was this tub, and I stepped in and almost bust my ass. And it just smelled like bleach, so strong, like bleach. I remember I had my hair bleached at the time, but it got even lighter after I went into that water. But everybody was quiet, and they were like, why do you want to get baptized? The lady held the microphone to me. No, my grandmother held the microphone to me. And I was like, because I want to be accepted into the kingdom of heaven. And they were like, yeah, because she wasn't, So she tells me to recite this prayer. And as she dunks me and I come up, the band just starts playing this very cathartic music. And I didn't feel anything, but it was I knew that I was supposed to feel something. So I kind of I guess gaslighted myself into feeling something. But at that point, I believe that I was sanctified, I guess that's what you would call it, where Jesus was supposed to be renewing me from the inside out. And, so a couple of days after that, me and my sister and my cousin all got baptized that day. And my grandmother baptized all of us, and I'm pretty sure that was one of the best moments of her life. But a couple of days after that, my mom was getting ready for work, so my mom always in a bad attitude at this point. And she On her way to the bathroom, she starts fussing that there's dishes in the sink and just being real mean and aggressive. And so as she's like walking past me, I look at her and I say, "Why are you yelling? Like, you don't have to yell at us." And I said it simply like that. And the look on her face, she was like I, you would have thought I just slapped her across her face. It was like literally, she was like, no. Her face was more like that. Cause like, I was right, and she didn't say anything. She just looked at me like that, froze, and then just walked into the bathroom. And after she came out of the shower, didn't say anything to us, and then went back in her room. And then a few minutes, she comes out of her room, and I see there's tears on her face. And she comes over to me and my sister and just hugs us and starts kissing us. And I've never been kissed by my mom. Like, I don't ever remember my mom kissing me ever, because when she was kissing me, I was a baby and I don't remember it. So I don't ever remember getting kissed by my mom and her actually like hugging me. And she was apologizing for her attitude. And, so this is what happened. She went to the bathroom to take her shower. And so I went over to the kitchen to start doing the dishes. And as I'm doing the dishes, I'm praying to God, and I say, I know this is not my mother. This is just how this is not the woman that she used to be. And I pray that I'm trying to remember the exact prayer. Pretty much I was saying to him, like, I know this is not really her. This is her because of what has happened to her. And I hope that, and I pray that you give us back that woman that she used to be. And then she came out of the bathroom, went into the room. And then when she came out of the room, that's when she started hugging us and kissing us. And I was like, my prayer worked. I was like, wow. So it's like, I look back at my life at some situations where it's like, it seems like there was something divine, because I know my mom. My mom was a very rude person. So it's like, for her to turn around, do a 360, I never seen that before. And I didn't do anything. All I said was, why are you yelling? And that was the first time I ever really stood up to my mom in a non-emotional way. Because, we got into screaming matches with each other where she's pinning me against the wall, telling me to shut up, because if I don't, she's going to end up doing something to me that's going to hurt. And, I just did not have a good relationship with my mom. And so from there, she started to become more tender towards me and my sister, kissing us more often, hugging us more often, spending more time with us. There'd be days where she'd actually apologize for the things that she's done. And it was so odd and uncomfortable because I wasn't used to it. And at the same time, I don't really care when I don't like it when people apologize to me, because I don't feel like, even if they should apologize to me because they did something wrong, it feels uncomfortable accepting that, because I don't know. I honestly don't know. But, so she started to act differently towards us. And to this day, she still goes to church. She drags my sister to church. They donate a lot of food to the church, and they're in that community. So that's a little bit of my upbringing, my childhood, and being introduced to it. I feel like, I'm not going to lie, but I feel like the story of Jesus, the whole New Testament, is very good to teach and teach young children. I believe there are a lot of stories in there, even some of the books in the Old Testament, like the book of Job, teaching about suffering. And sometimes, there are going to be hard times in our life, and you have to be patient. You honestly have to be patient. Patience means to withstand suffering, to have long suffering, not really know when the situation is going to end, but having this mindset where it's like you're willing to do that. You're willing to wait for as long as you have to. And, a lot of the old New Testament stories, I feel like, have a lot of good morals to teach children, about treating other people the way that you want to be treated. What's another one? I'm blanking. Treating other people the way you want to be treated. I think it's in Corinthians about what love is. I believe that because of the way I was raised, I did have a lot of good morals instilled in me about humility. Like Paul, I think it was Paul, talks a lot about humility, and I think he even said at one time, like, you can't talk about it too much, because once you start talking too much, it kind of goes away. I think that's what he was trying to say. But yeah, so I want to get into, I hate this. Like, I thought I was looking cute, and now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, I look crazy. But anyway, I'm not gonna focus on it. So fast forward, to, I want to say 2019 was when, we lived in this 1-bedroom apartment. Me and my sister, we slept on the couches in the living room. So everything our parents did in that room, we could hear it. Like, so we would hear them having sex. We would hear their conversations. And I hated it. I hated it. So I finally got headphones, and having headphones was like a miracle. But my mom would get upset because she couldn't hear the music that we were listening to. And she was very controlling. Like, I understand she was doing it to protect us, but any music that she found depressing or sad, she would not let us listen to. So she would literally make us play our songs to her, and then, like, she would approve them. And I do believe that you should protect your kids on a lot of things. I feel like as they get older, you can kind of loosen up your grip, but I feel like music is a form of self-expression. Music has been one of the things that has literally been therapy for me, because it's like, this person is talking about everything that I'm, experiencing. It's like, I love music. I even, used to write and record music. I learned how to play the piano. I taught myself how to play the piano, and I taught myself how to play the guitar. And so, music has always been a big part of my life. And, so anyway, so one night, we're sleeping, and my stepfather, he usually gets home around like 8 o'clock. That's when he got off of work. But this time, he didn't get home until like almost midnight. And when he comes in, I guess he was drunk, and, my parents begin fighting, and you can hear like them crashing around, knocking things off of the dressers. And it's like, it's scary, because that wasn't the first time they would fight. They would fight behind closed doors. And it's like, I would hear it, and all I would want to do is just run in their room and break it up. But at the same time, like, there was literally one time where I literally got up to go try to break it up, but I was so scared to get involved. I like just turned back around and sat down, and I just felt powerless. Like, there was nothing I can do, but I could literally hear them fighting each other and like hurting each other. And so at this point, all I can hear is my mom, and it sounded like she was dying. And I heard her say, "Somebody call the police." And I'm like, oh shit. And so, like, I don't know if I had a phone. I think I had a phone. And I was about to call, and then a couple seconds later, she's like, never mind, I got it. And she calls the police, and she says he has a knife. And so I didn't see anything. So my brain is making up, everything I can see. And it was just terrifying. So that night the police were called, and they said it's just best if you, separate yourselves for the night. Because it probably would have been bad if he had to go to jail, So they started giving us information about homeless shelters. And when I heard that, I was terrified, because I'm like, I don't want to go to a homeless shelter. I would rather stay in my abusive household than go to a homeless shelter. Like, that idea was so scary to me. And so we ended up, my mom was like, y'all got to pack a bag. And we ended up, packing what we could fit in a book bag, and, driving to my grandparents' house in the middle of the night. And luckily they were like, come on in, and they accepted us in, and we slept on their couches for about a month, You know, my grandfather hated it, but it was like he did not want us on the streets. He cared about us, you know. And so eventually we were able to move back into this bedroom, and literally the bedroom that I'm in is the same bedroom I was brought to when I was 4 years old. I've pretty much lived in this bedroom my whole life. It's so crazy that I ended up back here. And now I'm alone. You know, I get to enjoy this space by myself. But I ended up right back where I started. My mom, you know, eventually, when I turned 18, you know, my mom treated me even more like she was just happy to not have to support me anymore. And like, I mean, you know, I understand it. It's like if your child has a job, you don't want to be paying, you know, for anything because you're like, you got a job. You're not my responsibility anymore. But she would do things like ask my sister. She'd be like, Fala, you want something from the store? And she'd ask her in front of me, and she wouldn't ask me. Like, she wouldn't offer me to get me a snack, even though the snack would probably cost her $1. And this one time, you know, she was offering to buy my sister things in front of me. And I asked her, could I get something? And she gonna laugh at me. And was like, no, I don't give you money. Like, why would I give you money and you got a job? And I'm like, you know, I understand that. But it was like she didn't really need to ask my sister in front of me. She could have texted her or something. But but what's crazy is, you know, when my mom was 18, her mother was probably giving her money. I think when my mother was 18, she was pregnant. Or maybe she was pregnant at like 19 or 20. But either way, I'm pretty sure her mother was still helping her out. So to pretend like you weren't in my situation, you know, and to be cold to me, it did make me feel bad. It gave me that feeling again, like she doesn't actually care about me or love me. Like she don't want nothing to do with me. But around this time, she dug heavy into her faith. And I started to see that my mom still had a lot of resentment towards her mother from her childhood. Because, like I said, my grandmother was very religious. She's been religious her whole life. One day I'll tell my grandmother's story. Well, I'll tell it right now. I'll tell it quick. But pretty much, she was married to an alcoholic. Oh, no. She was in a relationship with the alcoholic. She had children with him. Oh, no. She was in a relationship with the alcoholic. She really wanted to get pregnant, but she could not get pregnant. And year after year after year after year, she would try to get pregnant. So when it finally wouldn't work, she decided to adopt a child. And then after that, she went to a church service one time and just started praising and worshiping and praising and worshiping. And after she did all that, she finally had a child. So she correlates her praise and worship to the fact that she was finally able to have a child. And she even said, like, she rushed it. And that's why she ended up adopting, and she shouldn't have never done that. So, you know, my grandmother has been a Christian for a very long time, but her understandings have changed over the years. Like, she is a lot more, I would call it, liberal than she used to be. There was a story of how my mother got her nose pierced. And because my grandmother was religious, she thought that was a sin. She thought that you weren't supposed to have tattoos and piercings because of what the Old Testament said. And she beat the shit out of my mother, like beat her with a stick and left whelps all over her body, all because she believed that getting a nose piercing was a sin. And it's like, to know that my grandmother used to be violent like that is like, wow, like you, the sweet lady who was holding me in her arms, rocking me back and forth. And so I started to see how, because of somebody's lack of understanding, they pretty much affected and traumatized somebody else because of their lack of understanding. And I started to see how that lack of understanding affected my mom. And it just hurt so bad because I realized that all of this came, you know, all these issues, how my mom was raised, the beliefs that my mom has about herself and about life, all came from this person who never even went back and was like, hey, I'm sorry for, you know, a lot of things I used to do. I didn't understand. And so I could see a lot of the resentment my mom still had towards her and the negativity my mom had towards her. And, but, you know, she was still a Christian at this time, you know, praising and worshiping hard. She ended up getting enough money to qualify for Section 8 housing, and she didn't want to put me on the lease because she'd have to pay more rent, and didn't want to put me in that situation. She didn't want to put herself in a situation where she could get in trouble for me not paying my rent. So she pretty much left me here, even though she brought me here because her and her husband were dysfunctional. She ended up leaving me here and going and getting her own apartment and moved out. And I remember when it happened, like, I was trying to be happy for them, but that does kind of hurt me. It honestly does, because, you know, it does hurt me. But I understand it. But, you know, now that I'm alone, you know, I started to really question my faith, because I've always felt like it's bad to question your faith. It's like you're questioning God, and how dare you question God? Like, even in the book of Job at the end, where Job is like, why did you do this to me? And God is pretty much like, no, you don't get to question me. Are you the one who holds the sun in the sky and keeps the planets in orbit? Like, how dare you question me? But at the same time, I couldn't not feel in my heart that there were questions that I had. I couldn't just ignore it. And, you know, I would pray, and people would say, oh, when you pray, you're not supposed to feel anything, but you're supposed to be having this conversation with God. But I started to notice that I wasn't really conversating with anybody. I was talking to myself. I was talking to myself and answering myself in my own head or out loud sometimes. It wasn't like I was talking to somebody. I was talking to myself. So it felt uncomfortable to pray. Another thing that bothered me was the fact that God was supposed to be omnipotent and omniscient, where he can see you all the time. And that made me uncomfortable, because, like, I don't want to be watched all the time. When I'm, like, you know, taking a shower, taking a shit, picking my nose, you know, doing all these things that you would do in private, you're violating my privacy because you're protecting me. Like, that makes me uncomfortable. And then another thing was, like, all of the women in my family have had issues with their father and have had that father wound. And so all of them, you know, formed a relationship with God based off of how he was a daddy God, father God. You know, he loves you. Nobody else loves you as much as him. And I'm just like, I don't feel that way. Like, the version and perspective of Christianity I was given was out of a lack of not having a father, but I didn't feel that way, because I knew that I had a father, but he wasn't a part of my life. And it was good that he wasn't a part of my life, because now that I'm older and I've reconnected with him, I'm like, I'm so glad you did not raise me. You would have drove me insane. I would have ran away from home if you would have raised me. Like, it was better that he was not in my life than he was. So it's like, I never had that where like, oh, I want a daddy. You know, even when I was younger, you know, I would try to act like, cry about it, because I knew that, you know, a lot of people would have sympathy for me, but I didn't actually feel that way, you know. I didn't. But so, you know, I started to feel all these things. And, you know, I was a prayer, you know, I would pray and all this other stuff. But at one point, it just started to feel like, why am I trying to convince myself that something is real that I don't believe is actually real, that I don't feel is actually real? And, you know, I was at the thrift store one day. There's actually this one verse, I believe it's in, it's not Proverbs, it's some book in the Old Testament, where God is pretty much like expressing how he is frustrated with his people because he brought them out. He made them his own. He loved them. He gave up other nations to keep his people safe and protected. And I would recite that to myself as if God was saying to me, like, he chose me, he called me out. And I would read those things and like feel inspired and feel that, and those are the types of things I had to say to myself when I was, going through these hard times. Negative, challenge my negative thoughts by using scripture. I haven't read the whole Bible. I've read maybe a third of it. But at this time, I think it was like 2 years ago, I was at the thrift store and this book caught my attention. It's called Sapiens, A Brief Look at Human History. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, A Brief Look at Humankind. And when I started to read this book, what caught my attention was that it was talking about other species of humans. And I was like, wait a minute, there's other species of humans? So I learned that, there was Homo sapiens, who originated in Africa, who started in Africa. There were Homo erectus, Homo floresiensis, Denisovans, Neanderthals, Arpidicus. I can't pronounce it, but there were other species of humans. And then I remembered in like 5th grade when we learned about Pangea and how the earth used to just be this super massive continent. And at one point it broke apart. And that's why you can kind of connect the pieces to some places around the world and see that they fit together like a puzzle. And so it started to make me think, okay, where is all this history in the Bible? I've never read any place where it is describing these natural, real events that happened. And, where is all this information? Because this information matters. It's important information, because if you really want to learn about where you came from, you got to go back to the beginning. You can't just start at a place in time, because all this shit happened before the Bible, before Jesus Christ. Homo floresiensis and Neanderthals all happened before Jesus Christ. And all these people, all these humans, existed, were living their lives, reproducing. They didn't know anything about Jesus. So it made me think okay, are they going to go to hell? All these other humans, did they have souls? It made me start having these questions. And then I started to read the book more, and it talked about how pretty much everything that we can experience today was from human imagination. Humans made trademarks and buildings. They even talked about limited liability, where from what I understand, it's a company can become an entity and separate from itself, so that if somebody sues the company or somebody is suing you, they don't actually sue you, they sue the entity. So this thing is acting as a person, and that system is being withheld, is being held together by imagination, by something that we've created that we can't even see, but we've created it. And that just made me go a whole nother different direction. I even started thinking about evolution and how life almost seems to be conscious, how natural selection has happened, how some species survive in certain areas and others don't, and how life has kind of tested and has seen what works where. It literally feels like nature was testing and testing and testing, and natural selection and just evolution, and how it honestly amazed me, because it was the universe seems to be awake and conscious. It is choosing these things, but in reality, life and the universe created consciousness. And consciousness, I believe the only point of being conscious is to gain understanding, so that it could continue to evolve and understand and grow and become more likely to survive. I believe that is the whole point of being alive, is to understand what helps to keep us alive even longer. So I just started to think about all these things, and it honestly made more sense to me. All these things made more sense to me and made me feel comforted and confident, versus believing in this guy who says that he's God, and if you don't believe in me, then you're going to die. You're going to go to hell. And it's I don't believe hell exists. I don't believe there is an afterlife. I honestly just believe that you die, you lose your consciousness, you lose that ability to be aware and conscious, and you just go back to the earth. Your body decays and it goes back into the earth, and everything that is made of you is going to be used and transformed into something else. So in essence, you don't actually cease to exist because there are remnants of you, but you cease to be conscious. And I believe the whole point of being alive is to experience it, to be conscious, to enjoy life the best that you can. Like, I understand that there are people who were born with disabilities and stuff like that. I believe there are people who are born in this bad situations, but I honestly believe that you have to, I don't know, like, I honestly don't know. I really don't know. But for me, in my life, I feel like I was given an amazing opportunity to experience without any type of disability. I wasn't born with a disability. There's nothing wrong with me. I mean, I got my mental issues, but there's really nothing wrong with me. So I've been given a great opportunity to achieve, to take opportunities, and to enjoy my life. And I don't believe religion is necessary to do that. Thus far, I've gotten myself where I am with the support of my family and my family. And my family has a big role in that, but it's not necessary for me to believe in anything, because that belief doesn't aid to my life, and it doesn't change what's going to happen at the end of my life. I'm very confident that you just die. And so it's like, that is scary, but I've tried to simulate that sometimes, like just laying in my bed and trying to imagine what it feels like to not be alive, but just like you really can't do it. But I just don't feel like it's necessary. I have a good life. And though I'm not able to see it all the time and able to stay in that mindset where I am enjoying it, I know that it's good. And I know that my vision is being distorted. And once that comes off, I'm able to enjoy it. Like, I used to want to not be alive sometimes. And I was sitting outside the other day, just like being grateful of my life, because it's like, if I was not alive, I would not experience anything. I wouldn't be able to see the sun. I wouldn't be able to see the colors. I wouldn't be able to feel the wind. I wouldn't be able to feel the sun beating down on my scalp. And it feels good. Like, I wouldn't be able to experience swimming and water and one day giving birth. Like, I'm so grateful that I am alive, but I'm not grateful to this God or this thing. I'm just grateful to be here, because me being here is miraculous. Everything that had to happen to get me to a point of being alive, like, that is miraculous. I honestly believe it is. And the more I started to learn about like thermodynamics and entropy, like the first law of, I think it's thermodynamics, is energy cannot be created or destroyed. And I learned that back in middle school. And so it's like, okay, well, people talk about having a spirit, and your spirit or your soul is the thing that goes to hell. And I'm like, okay, well, if energy can't be created or destroyed, what is this energy that is powering this soul experience? But then I know that at some point, everything will cease to exist. I think there's like this scientific claim that like the earth, our universe, is being like pulled towards something. And at some point, everything is going to blow up and not exist anymore. Like, at some point along the line, like, that's what they're predicting is going to happen millions and millions and millions of years later. So at some point, everything is not going to, souls won't exist, spirits won't exist, ghosts, people, like, at some point it's going to end. But I know that, like it said, energy can't be created or destroyed. So what is going to be transformed from the ending of this experience to like the next? I find human anthropology very interesting. And I believe that me not being a Christian helped me to be able to ask these questions and get answers, and actually pull me closer towards a truth that is very empowering. So I don't regret my decision, but it does suck, because It's not like I can have deep philosophical conversations with my mother or my grandmother because they're always going to try to relate it back to what they know. Um, but to each their own. I think one of the best things is like, I don't feel a need to evangelize and bring people into my belief. I believe that everybody should believe whatever helps them to continue through this life. One time I was driving through Baltimore City, and there was this woman holding up a sign, and I saw the words Jesus. So I immediately, turned my head. I was like, I don't even want to look at it. But, I was like, let me look. And as I drove by, it's this woman holding this sign. I think it was like Jesus loves you or something. And she's like smiling to everybody going by. And I'm like, she looks so crazy. But at the same time, I thought about it. I was like, this woman woke up this morning, decided to get dressed, brushed her teeth, put on clothes to go outside and stand on the sidewalk and smile at people while holding up a sign. That literally, her belief and her faith literally gave her a reason to wake up that day and put a plan in her head. Like, I'm not against it. Like, whatever you need to believe to help you to continue through this life with joy, peace, and happiness, do it. But at the same time, that's what I get from this. But I don't feel a need to try to pull people into that and save their souls. I just believe what I believe. And I don't need the validation. Like, I don't ever get the validation, but I don't need it to, feel secure about my beliefs. So that's kind of why I've stepped away from Christianity, religion in general. I understand that it's all human imagination. It is all something humans have made up to try to explain and understand this life that we live in, because at sometimes it does seem miraculous. It does seem divine. It does seem like there is a creator, but the universe is the creator. The universe created everything. It came from the universe. So, unless the universe is God, then I don't believe in a God. I actually heard something about Spinoza's God, and that was the idea that God was nature. But God wasn't somebody that you pray to, and God isn't something that humans can control. Like, God isn't stepping down to interact with humans. He's maintaining nature. He is the nature. He is the wind. He is the grass. And I identify closer with that idea. I like that idea. But to live my life, I have everything that I need within me. I know what I need. And all I need in this life is the ability to self-reflect and to be aware. Because if I'm not aware, then I won't be able to reflect on anything. Like, I'm just living and going through life. Like, I need those two things to be able to grow. And I also need patience and compassion with myself. I need a support system. I need a family, I need friends, but I don't need some religion or spiritual practice to tell me how to live my life. It's all just something people create. Like, even I believe like the Aztecs and the Incas, they believed in like sun gods, and like the sun was a sister and the moon was a sister. And it's like for Christians to go around and be like, oh, we're the only true God. Yet there was people way before you who believed in something else. And they probably believed that that was the true God and the true way of going about things. So it's like, how can all of you say that yours is the true way when there's been so many people before you and while you existed? I learned even about Constantine and how when Constantine became a Christian, that they built that into their society where everybody was a Christian versus everybody just believing in their own pagan gods and traditions. Everybody was able to unite under Christianity for some reason that worked economically, socially. And so, it began to spread because one person made a decision to really incorporate that into their society. And then I also learned that Africans, I heard something about how Ethiopia, they believed in Christianity even before, all that Constantine shit. But I know West Africa, Northeast, yeah, they had their own traditions, their own gods, their own beliefs. And when they became slaves and were colonized, Christianity was forced onto them. They were pretty much wiped away of their own culture and was forced to believe in a religion because that religion justified the way that they were being treated. And so it's like, oh, when people say Christianity is a white man's religion, I mean, we weren't, West Africans weren't doing Christianity. They believed in like all these other, this other shit, I didn't know that gospel music originated from Africans. I thought that was something, that already existed, but gospel music, R&B, hip hop, all those things, blues, jazz, came from Africans. I even learned about race and how race isn't actually an identifier of who you are, because I can be this skin color but be from Africa, but then I can see somebody who's a lot lighter than me and think that they have European genes, when in reality they're from Africa too. They're just lighter than me. There's different shades of people depending on where you go. So just because you are a certain color, that doesn't actually identify where you're from, your ethnicity. And so I learned about that. I've been learning so much, and it's just so crazy that like I think it's because of me dropping Christianity, I'm able to ask myself and dig for information and find information that is, like I said, more empowering and actually more relevant, to what is happening in life now, what is going on around me. Like I said, it's not necessary, but I find it beautiful that some people can have a relationship with something that they don't even know exists, but they, have faith that it does. I believe that's beautiful. That is beautiful intelligence of the human mind, that a mind can literally create a relationship with something that isn't even tangible. They don't even, like, I think that is beautiful. I think that is like a sign of intellect and intelligence, and I don't knock it. Like, whatever you got to do, whatever you got to believe, as long as it's not hurting, as long as it is, and I can't even say that because some people believe in things that I don't think they should be believing in, so I can't even say that. But I honestly think people should believe in whatever helps them to prosper and to continue and manage and cope with life and help them to stay positive and grounded. That's what I believe.